Welcome to Management 2110's Chapter 17 lecture, based on the readings from the textbook Management, 14th edition, by Robbins and Coulter. So we're going to get started. First, we're going to cover the learning objectives for Chapter 17. We are going to define leader and leadership. Then we're going to compare and contrast early theories of leadership. We're going to describe the three major contingency theories of leadership. We're going to develop your skill at choosing an effective leadership style. Then we're going to discuss contemporary issues affecting leadership. Know how to prepare for an effective transition to a leadership position. And then we're going to describe 21st century views of leadership. Remember, I've said this throughout the semester. There is a difference between leadership and management. It's important to note that they are not the same thing. So who are leaders and what is leadership? A leader is someone who can influence others and who has managerial authority. So leaders tend to influence people to accomplish organizational goals, strategies. And leadership is a process of influencing a group to achieve goals, as I just stated. Now, leadership research in the 1920s and the 1930s focused on isolating leadership traits, that is, characteristics that would differentiate leaders from non-leaders. Now, some of the traits studied included physical stature, appearance, social class, emotional stability, fluency of speech, and sociability. Despite the best efforts of researchers, it proved impossible to identify a set of traits that would always differentiate a leader from a non-leader. So again, research focused on identifying personal characteristics that differentiated leaders from non-leaders. It was unsuccessful. It proved impossible to identify a set of traits that would always differentiate a leader from a non-leader. So Exhibit 17-1 illustrates the 8 traits associated with leadership. The first one is drive, and leaders exhibit a high effort level. They are a relatively high desire for achievement. They are ambitious, they have a lot of energy, and they are tirelessly persistent in their activities, and they show initiative. The next trait, they have a desire to lead. As leaders have a strong desire to influence and lead others. They demonstrate the willingness to take responsibility. The next one is honesty and integrity. And leaders build trusting relationships with followers by being truthful or non-deceitful and by showing high consistency between word and deed. The next is self-confidence. Followers look to leaders for an absence of self-doubt. Leaders, therefore, need to show self-confidence in order to convince followers of the rightness of their goals and decisions. The next trait is intelligence. That is, leaders need to be intelligent enough to gather, synthesize, and interpret large amounts of information, and they need to be able to create visions, solve problems, and make correct decisions. The next trait is job-relevant knowledge. Effective leaders have a high degree of knowledge about the company, industry, and technical matters. In-depth knowledge allows leaders to make well-informed decisions and to understand the implications of those decisions. The next is extroversion. Leaders are energetic, lively people. They are sociable, assertive, and rarely silent or withdrawn. The next is proneness to guilt. Guilt proneness is positively related to leadership effectiveness because it produces a strong sense of responsibility for others. So leadership in research in the 1920s and 30s focused on isolating leadership traits. Like I said earlier, one of the behavioral theories, leadership theories that identify behaviors that differentiate effective leaders from ineffective leaders. So I'm going to say that again. Behavioral theories are leadership theories that identify behaviors that differentiate effective leaders from ineffective leaders. Now, the autocratic style described a leader who dictated work methods, made unilateral decisions, and limited employee participation. The democratic style described a leader who involved employees in decision-making, delegated authority, and used feedback as an opportunity for coaching employees. In other words, this person was very transformational as a leader. Finally, the laissez-faire leader style let the group make decisions and complete the work in whatever way it saw fit. So they're very laid back, total empowerment, like almost like a I don't care attitude. Just do it. The researchers' results seem to indicate that the democratic style contributed to both good quantity and quality of work. Now, the Ohio State studies identified two important dimensions of leader behavior. The first was called initiating structure, which referred to the extent to which a leader defined his or her role and the roles of group members in attaining goals. Now, it included behaviors that involved attempts to organize work, work relationships, and goals. The second was called consideration, which was defined as the extent to which a leader had work relationships characterized by mutual trust and respect for group members' ideas and feelings. A leader who was high in consideration helped group members with personal problems. They were friendly and approachable and treated all group members as equals. He or she showed concern for what was considerate of his or her followers' comfort, well-being, status, and satisfaction. Now, research found that a leader who is high in both initiating structure and consideration sometimes achieved high group task performance and high group member satisfaction, but not always. So the leadership studies conducted at the University of Michigan at the same time as those done at Ohio State also helped to identify behavioral characteristics of leaders that were related to performance effectiveness. Now, the Michigan group also came up with two dimensions of leadership behavior, which they labeled as employee-oriented and production-oriented. Now, leaders who were employee-oriented were described as emphasizing interpersonal relationships. The production-oriented leaders, in contrast, tended to emphasize the task aspects of the job. Now, unlike the other studies, the Michigan researchers concluded that leaders who were employee-oriented were able to get high group productivity and high group member satisfaction. Now, the behavioral dimensions from these early leadership studies provided the basis for the development of a two-dimensional grid for appraising leadership styles. Now, this managerial grid used the behavioral dimensions concern for people, which is the vertical part of the grid, and the concern for production, which is the horizontal part of the grid, and evaluated the leader's use of these behaviors, ranking them on a scale from 1 being low to 9 being high. Now, although the grid has 81 potential categories in which leaders' behavioral styles may fall, only 5 styles were named, and that's impoverished management, which is 1-to-1 or low concern for production, low concern for people. Task management, which is 9-to-1 or high concern for production, low concern for people. Then you have middle of the road management, which is 5-to-5 or medium concern for production, medium concern for people. Then you have country club management, which is 1 to 9, or low concern for production, high concern for people, and team management, 9 to 9, or high concern for production, high concern for people. Now, of these 5 styles, the researchers concluded that managers perform best when using a 9 to 9 style, which was the team management. And that was having, of course, the high concern for production, high concern for people. Now, Exhibit 17-2 here illustrates the behavioral theories of leadership. So to the left, you have the name of the study, and then you go into the behavioral dimensions, and then the conclusions associated with each study. So you have your University of Iowa study, democratic style involving subordinates, delegating authority and encouraging participation. You had your autocratic style, dictating work methods, centralizing decision-making, and limiting participation. And then you have, of course, you had your laissez-faire style, giving group freedom to make decisions and complete work. Now, the conclusion on that study was democratic style leadership was most effective, although later studies showed mixed results. Now, in Ohio State, the consideration, being considerate of followers' ideas and feelings, and the initiating structure is the structuring work and work relationships to meet job goals. And the conclusion on that study was high to high leader, high in consideration, and high in initiating structure, achieved high subordinate performance and satisfaction, but not in all situations. And then we had the University of Michigan study, and that entailed employee-oriented, which emphasized interpersonal relationships and taking care of employees' needs. And then there was, of course, production-oriented, that emphasized technical or task aspects of the job. The findings were employee-oriented leaders were all associated with high group productivity and higher job satisfaction. And then finally, we had the managerial grid study. It entails the concern for people, measured the leader's concern for subordinates on a scale of 1 to 9, like we just covered, low to high. There was also a concern for production, which measured leaders' concern for getting the job done on a scale from 1 to 9, low to high. And the findings in that study were leaders perform best with a 9 to 9 style, that is high concern for production and high concern for people. So the first comprehensive contingency model for leadership was developed by Fiedler. The Fiedler contingency model proposed that effective group performance depended on properly matching the leadership style and the amount of control and influence in this situation. Now, the model was based on the premise that a certain leadership style would be most effective in different types of situations. Now, the keys were to, 1, define those leadership styles and the different types of situations, and then 2, identify the appropriate combinations of style and situation. So Fiedler proposed that a key factor in leadership success was in fact an individual's basic leadership style, either task-oriented or relationship-oriented. Now, to measure a leader style, Fiedler developed the least preferred coworker, the LPC questionnaire. And this questionnaire contained 18 pairs of contrasting adjectives. Now, for example, pleasant to unpleasant, cold to warm, boring to interesting, or friendly to unfriendly. And respondents were asked to think of all the coworkers they had ever had and had to describe that one person they least enjoyed working with by rating him or her on a scale of 1 to 8 for each of the 18 sets of adjectives. Now, the 8 always described the positive adjective out of the pair, and the 1 was always described as the negative adjective of the pair. So, after an individual's leadership style had been assessed through the LPC, it was time to evaluate the situation in order to be able to match the leader with the situation. And Fiedler's research uncovered 3 contingency dimensions that define the key situational factors in leadership effectiveness. Now, the first one is leader-member relations, and that is the degree of confidence, trust, and respect employees had for their leader, rated as either good or poor. Next, you had task structure, and that is the degree to which job assignments were formalized and structured, and they were rated either high or low. And then finally, you had position power, and that is the degree of influence a leader had over activities such as hiring, firing, discipline, promotions, salary increases, and you're rated as either strong or weak. So each leadership situation was evaluated in terms of these 3 contingency variables, which when combined produce 8 possible situations that were either favorable or unfavorable for the leader. So you got to see the bottom of the chart exhibited here in the 17-3, where situations 1, 2, and 3 were classified as highly favorable for the leader. Situations 4, 5, and 6 were moderately favorable for the leader, and situations 7 and 8 were described as highly unfavorable for the leader. Now, Fiedler concluded that task-oriented leaders performed better in very favorable situations and in very unfavorable situations. So you got to see the top of this exhibit 17-3, where performance is shown on the vertical axis and situation favorableness is shown in the horizontal axis. So on the other hand, though, the relationship-oriented leaders performed better in moderately favorable situations. So Paul Hersey and Ken Blanchard developed a leadership theory that has gained a strong following among management development specialists. I know Air Force uses this model. This is a very popular model. Also, it's become popular with law enforcement. It's extremely popular in environments where you have a huge disparity between newer people and seasoned people who are doing the same tasks. And this model is called Situational Leadership Theory. It's the SLT. And it is a contingency theory that focuses on followers' readiness. Okay, much of this has to do with, as I explained in previous chapters where I've referenced this theory, competence and commitment. So regardless of what a leader does, the group's effectiveness depends on the actions of the followers. And this important dimension has been overlooked or underemphasized in most leadership theories. And readiness, as defined by Hersey and Blanchard, refers to the extent to which people have the ability and the willingness to accomplish a specific task. So the situational leadership theory uses the same 2 leadership dimensions that Fiedler identified, task and relationship behaviors. However, Hersey and Blanchard go a step further by considering each as either high or low and combining them into 4 leadership styles described as follow. So the first you have telling, and that's high task, low relationship. The leader defines roles and tells people what, how, when, and where to do various tasks. Next is selling, and that's high task, high relationship. The leader provides both directive and supportive behavior. Next is participating, that is low task, high relationship. The leader and followers share in decision making. The main role of the leader is facilitating and communicating. So not a lot of directing involved here because the task is low as far as difficulty. You don't want to micromanage. Delegating, the low task to low relationship. And that is the leader provides little direction or support. And this you can kind of do with most of your seasoned employees who have a high level of competence, high level of commitment. You can just delegate. You don't, like I said earlier, it's all about staying away from micromanaging. You do not want to take the wind out of people's sails. So the final component in the model is the 4 stages of follower readiness. Okay, so you have the R1, indicating that people are both unable and unwilling to take responsibility for doing something. Followers aren't competent or confident. R2, people are unable but willing to do the necessary job tasks. Followers are motivated but lack the appropriate skills. You see this sometimes with new employees. They're very eager. However, they just don't have the skills or maybe the knowledge. And then you have R3, people are able but unwilling to do what the leader wants. Followers are competent, but you don't want to do something, so you lack the commitment. And this happens sometimes during organizational change, lazy employees, and as a good leader, you have that type of awareness of their level of competence to know, hey, look, I know you can do the job, and I know you know what you're doing. It's just that you're just being reluctant right now. So it takes a different leadership style than, if somebody were both willing and had the knowledge. So you don't want to have a blanket leadership style. And R4, people are both able and willing to do what is asked of them. Now, another approach to understanding leadership is the path goal theory, which states that leaders' job is to assist followers in attaining their goals and to provide direction or support needed to ensure that their goals are compatible with the goals of the group or organization. Now, developed by Robert House, the path goal theory takes key elements from the expectancy theory of motivation. The term path goal is derived from the belief that effective leaders remove the roadblocks and pitfalls so that followers have a clearer path to help them get from where they are to the achievement of their work goals. So again, path goal is a leadership theory that says that a leader's job is to assist followers in attaining their goals and to provide direction or support needed to ensure that their goals are compatible with the goals of the group or organization. So House identified 4 leadership behaviors. Now the first is the directive leader. And this person lets subordinates know what's expected of them, schedules the work to be done, and gives specific guidance on how to accomplish tasks. Next is the supportive leader. And this person shows concern for the needs of followers and is friendly. Next, you have the participative leader. And this person consults with group members and uses their suggestions before making a decision. Then you have the achievement-oriented leader. And this person sets challenging goals and expects followers to perform at their highest level. Now, in contrast to Fiedler's view that a leader couldn't change his or her behavior, House assumed that leaders are flexible and can display any or all leadership styles depending on the situation. As Exhibit 17-4 illustrates, the path goal theory proposes 2 situational or contingency variables that moderate the leadership behavior outcome relationship moderate the leadership behavior outcome relationship. Now, those in the environment that are outside of the control of the follower, those factors including task structure, formal authority system, and the work group, and those that are part of the personal characteristics of the follower, including locus of control, experience, and perceived ability. So the leader-member exchange theory, the LMX, says leaders create in groups and out-groups, and those in the in-group will have higher performance ratings, less turnover, and greater job satisfaction. The LMX theory suggests that early on in the relationship between a leader and a given follower, a leader will implicitly categorize a follower as an in or as an out. Now, that relationship tends to remain fairly stable over time. Leaders also encourage LMX by rewarding those employees with whom they want a closer linkage and punishing those with whom they do not. So again, your LMX theory, leader-member exchange theory, is the leadership theory that says leaders create in-groups and out-groups, and those in the in-group will have higher performance ratings, less turnover, and great job satisfaction. Now, many early leadership theories viewed leaders as transactional leaders, that is, leaders who lead primarily by using social exchanges or transactions. Now, transactional leaders guide or motivate followers to work towards established goals by exchanging rewards for their productivity. So it's very much transactional, being after the fact. But another type of leader, a transformational leader, stimulates and inspires, they transform followers to achieve extraordinary outcomes. So again, the transactional leaders are leaders who lead primarily by using social exchanges or transactions. And then transformational leaders are leaders who stimulate and inspire. They transform followers to achieve extraordinary outcomes. Now, a charismatic leader is an enthusiastic, self-confident leader whose personality and actions influence people to behave in certain ways. Several authors have attempted to identify personal characteristics of a charismatic leader. The most comprehensive analysis identified 5 such characteristics. They have a vision, the ability to articulate that vision, a willingness to take risks to achieve that vision, a sensitivity to both environmental constraints and follower needs, and behaviors that are out of the ordinary. Now, although the term vision is often linked with charismatic leadership, visionary leadership is different. It's the ability to create and articulate a realistic, credible, and attractive vision of the future that improves on the present situation. Now, this vision, if properly selected and implemented, is so energizing that it is, in effect, jumpstarts the future by calling forth the skills, talents, and resources to make it happen. So again, charismatic leader, an enthusiastic, self-confident leader whose personality and actions influence people to behave in certain ways. Visionary leadership is the ability to create and articulate a realistic, credible, and attractive vision of the future that improves upon the present situation. Now, authentic leadership focuses on the moral aspects of being a leader. Authentic leaders know who they are, know what they believe in, and act on those values and beliefs openly and candidly. Ethical leadership. An ethical leader puts public safety ahead of profits, holds culpable employees accountable, and creates a culture in which employees feel that they could and should do a better job. Now, because leadership is increasingly taking place within a team context and more organizations are using work teams, the role of the leader in guiding team members has become increasingly important. So the role of team leader is different from the traditional leadership role. Now, many leaders are not equipped to handle the change to employee teams, as one consultant noted. Even the most capable managers have trouble making the transition because all the command and control type things that they were encouraged to do before are no longer appropriate. Things change when you encompass leader, team dynamics. Now, one study looking at organizations that reorganize themselves around employee teams, found certain common responsibilities for all leaders. Now, these leader responsibilities included coaching, facilitating, handling disciplinary problems, reviewing team and individual performance, training, and communication. However, a more meaningful way to describe a team leader's job is to focus on two priorities. The first one is managing the team's external boundary, and the second is facilitating the team process. And these priorities entail 4 specific leadership roles, which will be identified in Exhibit 17-5. Many leaders are not equipped to handle the change to employee teams. Remember that. And, also remember to the 2 priorities that team leaders' job focuses on, and that's managing the team's external boundaries and facilitating the team process. So here we have the Exhibit 17-5, and it illustrates the 4 specific leadership roles. Okay, you have the coach, you have the liaison with the external constituencies, you have your conflict manager, and your troubleshooter. So, I know in the past I've spoke about powers, and here we are. I actually wish we addressed powers earlier in the course, because it kind of corresponds with everything from change management to leading strategies to conflict resolution. Where do leaders get their power? That is, their right and capacity to influence work actions or decisions. Now, there's 5 sources of leader power that have been identified. And that is legitimate, coercive, reward, expert, and referent power. Legitimate power and authority are the same. Legitimate power represents the power a leader has as a result of his or her position in the organization. I have this power because I'm the boss. Comes along with the position. And although people in positions of authority are also likely to have reward and coercive power, legitimate power is broader than the power to coerce and reward. And now, next you have your coercive power, and that is the power a leader has to punish or control. Followers react to this power out of fear of the negative results that might occur if they don't comply. Now, managers typically have some coercive power, such as being able to suspend, demote, or reprimand employees, or to assign them work that they find unpleasant or desirable. Nonetheless, it is a power to try to sway people. It's unfortunate at times leaders have to use it. Next is reward power, and that is the power to give positive rewards. Now, a reward can be anything a person values, such as money, favorable performance appraisals, promotions, interesting work assignments, friendly colleagues, and preferred work shifts or sales territories. So reward power is a power that's favored by some leaders to influence personnel. Next is expert power, and that is power based on expertise. Like I said, many people will follow people based on, how well they do their job, how knowledgeable they are about very, very important topics. So expert power is the power based on expertise, special skills, or knowledge. Now, if an employee has skills, knowledge, or expertise that's critical to a work group, that person's expert power is enhanced. Okay, a lot of times you can use expert individuals with high expert power as change agents. They'll be great at eliminating some of those barriers to change because people will follow them because they think if they do what they do, that they're doing the right thing. Now, finally, referent power is the power that arises because of a person's desirable resources or personality traits or personal traits. If I admire you and want to be associated with you, you can exercise power over me because I want to please you. Referent power develops out of admiration of another and desire to be like that person. Again, much like expert power, these people can be very effective change agents when leading change, or you want to mitigate a crisis, or conflict to involve them. And these are the charismatic, likable people. People will follow them just based on the likability. And I'm sure a lot of people have leaders that they liked, so they followed them. And maybe the leaders didn't have the best leadership attributes across the board, but yet they had that likability or that charisma that made you want to follow. Now, developing trust. Honesty is absolutely essential to leadership. It's always the best policy. Remember that. So if people are going to follow someone willingly, whether it be in the battle or into a boardroom, they first want to assure themselves that the person is worthy of their trust. And in addition to being honest, credible leaders are confident and inspiring. They are personally able to effectively communicate their confidence and enthusiasm. Thus, followers judge a leader's credibility in terms of his or her honesty, competence, and ability to inspire. Now, trust is closely intertwined with the concept of credibility, and in fact, the terms are often used interchangeably. Trust is defined as the belief in the integrity, character, and ability of a leader. And followers who trust a leader are willing to be vulnerable to the leader's actions because they are confident that their rights and interests will not be abused. So again, credibility is the degree to which followers perceive someone as honest, competent, and able to inspire. And trust is the belief in the integrity, character, and ability of a leader. So research has identified 5 dimensions that make up the concept of trust. First being integrity, and that is honesty and truthfulness. Competence, and keywords associated with confidence, technical and interpersonal knowledge and skills. Consistency, which is reliability, predictability, and good judgment in handling situations. Next is loyalty, and that is the willingness to protect a person physically and emotionally. Openness, and that's the willingness to share ideas and information freely. Now, of these 5 dimensions, integrity seems to be one of the most critical when someone assesses another's trustworthy. It's also a very, frequently used core value, because it does encompass, those being honest, truthful. It's what organizations want to foster when they, foster trust. So given the importance of trust to effective leadership, how can leaders build trust? So Exhibit 17-6 here lists some suggestions. So, you want to be transparent, so you want to practice openness. Be fair. Speak your feelings. Tell the truth. Show consistency. Fulfill your promises. Do what you say you're going to do. Maintain confidences and demonstrate competence. So they're developing empower employees, okay? And that entails increasing the decision-making discretion of workers. Millions of individual employees and employee teams are making the key operating decisions that directly affect their work. Empowering employees is very much closely connected with trusting them. It's a motivating factor. When employees feel empowered, they feel somebody trusts in their skills, abilities, and knowledge. To go on and make decisions. It fosters shared leadership. Yeah, I mean, a lot gets done with empowerment. The cognitive diversity in the thinking, the team approach to fixing problems and accomplishing goals. So empowering employees is a very, very effective approach to fostering that trust and motivation. Now, one general conclusion that surfaces from leadership research is that effective leaders do not use a single style. Okay. They adjust their style to the situation. Although not mentioned explicitly, national culture is certainly an important situational variable in determining which leadership style will be most effective. Now, what works in China isn't likely to be effective in France or Canada. Now, for instance, one study of Asian leadership styles revealed that Asian managers preferred leaders who were competent decision makers, effective communicators, and supportive of employees. And national culture affects leadership style because it influences how followers will respond. Leaders can't and shouldn't just choose their styles randomly. They are constrained by the cultural conditions their followers have come to expect. So remember, effective leaders do not use a single style. They adjust their style to the situation. And remember that national culture is certainly an important situational variable in determining which style of leadership will be most effective. Now, given the importance of trust to effective leadership, how can leaders effectively build this is cross-cultural leadership. So these are just some examples. I'm going to leave these up. As far as building trust globally, you want to read these. You want to know, if you're going to be working cross-culturally, you're going to want to know some of the norms, the expectations, the acceptable behaviors when working with other cultures. So evidence indicates that leadership training is more likely to be successful with individuals who are high self-monitors than with low self-monitors. Such individuals have the flexibility to change their behavior as different situations may require. In addition, organizations may find that individuals with higher levels of a trait called motivation to lead are more receptive to leadership development opportunities. Okay. Certain individual job and organizational variables can act as substitutes for leadership, negating the influence of the leader. For instance, follower characteristics such as experience, training, professional orientation, or need for independence can neutralize the effect of leadership. Now, these characteristics can replace the employee's need for a leader's support or ability to create structure and reduce task ambiguity. Now, similarly, jobs that are inherently unambiguous and routine and intrinsically satisfying may place fewer demands on leaders. And finally, such organizational characteristics as explicit formalized goals, rigid rules, and procedures, or cohesive work groups can substitute for formal leadership. So in review of our first learning objective, a leader is someone who can influence others and who has managerial authority. Leadership is a process of leading a group and influencing that group to achieve its goals. Managers should be leaders because leading is one of the 4 management functions. In review of our second learning objective, early attempts to define leadership traits were unsuccessful, although later attempts found 7 traits associated with leadership. The University of Iowa studies explored 3 leadership styles. The only conclusion was that the group members were more satisfied under a democratic leader than under an autocratic leader. Also, the Ohio State studies identified 2 dimensions of leader behavior: initiating structure and consideration. A leader high in both those dimensions at times achieved high group task performance and high group member satisfaction, but not always. And the University of Michigan studies looked at employee-oriented leaders and production-oriented leaders. They concluded that leaders who were employee-oriented could get high group productivity and high group member satisfaction. And the managerial grid looked at leaders concerned for production and concerned for people and identified 5 leader styles. Although it was suggested that a leader who was high in concern for production and high in concern for people was the best, there was no substantive evidence for that conclusion. And as the behavioral studies showed, a leader's behavior has a dual nature. First, a focus on the task, and second, a focus on the people. In review of our third learning objective, Fiedler's model attempted to define the best style to use in particular situations. He measured leader style, relationship-oriented or task-oriented, using the least preferred coworker questionnaire. Now, Fiedler also assumed a leader's style was fixed. He measured 3 contingency dimensions: leader-to-member relations, task structure, and position power. And the model suggests that the task-oriented leaders perform best in very favorable and unfavorable situations, and relationship-oriented leaders perform best in moderately favorable situations. Hersey and Blanchard's situational leadership theory focused on followers' readiness. They identified 4 leadership styles: telling, which is high task, low relationship; selling, high task, high relationship; participating, low task, high relationship; and delegating, low task, low relationship. They also identified 4 stages of readiness: unable and unwilling, using the telling style; unable but willing, using the selling style; able but unwilling, using the participative style; and able and willing, using the delegating style. And remember that the path goal model developed by Robert House identified 4 leadership behaviors: directive, supportive, participative, and achievement-oriented. He assumed that a leader can and should be able to use any of these styles. 2 situational contingency variables were found in the environment and in the follower. Essentially, the path goal model says that a leader should provide direction and support as needed, that is, structure the path so followers can achieve goals. In review of our fourth learning objective, leader-member exchange theory, the LMX theory, says that leaders create in-groups and out-groups, and those in the in-group will have higher performance ratings, less turnover, and greater job satisfaction. A transactional leader exchanges rewards for productivity, where a transformational leader stimulates and inspires followers to achieve goals. A charismatic leader is an enthusiastic and self-confident leader whose personality and actions influence people to have certain ways, to behave in certain ways. People can learn to be charismatic, and a visionary leader is able to create and articulate a realistic, credible, and attractive vision for the future. A team leader has 2 priorities: manage the team's external boundary, and facilitate the team process. 4 leader roles are involved: liaison with external constituencies, troubleshooter, conflict manager, and coach. In review of our 5th and final learning objective, the 5 sources of a leader's power are legitimate, which comes from authority of position; coercive comes from punish or control; reward comes from giving positive rewards; expert comes from special expertise, skills, or knowledge; and referring comes from desirable resources or traits. And today's leaders face the issues of managing power, developing trust, empowering employees, leading across cultures, and becoming an effective leader. Thank you for your participation in the Chapter 17 lecture. Stay tuned for the Chapter 18 lecture, our final lecture. Until then, check Blackboard for the week's activities and assignments.